Rajiv Malhotra, a billionaire businessman with everything money could buy, and Priya Sharma, a young model drawn into a world of luxury she never imagined. Together, they seemed like the perfect couple. But behind the glossy photographs and lavish parties, their marriage was crumbling. When a romantic getaway aboard their luxury yacht ended with Priya's lifeless body washing ashore, the world discovered a chilling truth. Wealth and power can hide the darkest secrets, but not forever. Rajiv Malhotra was a name that carried weight across India's business world. At 52, he was more than just a wealthy man. He was a figure of influence, power, and carefully crafted prestige. From luxury real estate to high-profile investments, his empire stretched across the globe. He owned penthouses in London, villas in Dubai, and sprawling estates in Delhi. Yet, despite his opulence, Rajiv's personal life had long remained quiet. Marked by a divorce years earlier and an image of a man too consumed by work to care for companionship, that silence ended when he married Priya Sharma, a 24-year-old model whose beauty and charm had made her a rising figure in Mumbai's fashion industry. The announcement stunned many, not only because of the 28-year age gap, but because Rajiv had always seemed uninterested in public displays of affection. Their wedding was the talk of the country. It's held at a royal palace in Udaipur. It was filled with chandeliers, fireworks, and celebrity guests flown in from around the world. Media outlets covered every detail, from Priya's diamond-encrusted lehenga to Rajiv's arrival on an elephant draped in gold. Social media buzzed with fascination, but behind the excitement were whispers of unease. People questioned whether the marriage was born from love or convenience. Was Priya searching for stability in the arms of an older man with unimaginable wealth? Or had Rajiv, tired of loneliness, sought a young and glamorous partner to complete the image of success he projected? To the public, Rajiv played the part of the perfect husband, showering Priya with gifts and whisking her away to Europe, the Maldives, and New York. Their photographs flooded magazines, painting a picture of romance and fairy tale indulgence. Yet beneath the sparkle of diamonds and champagne, unease lingered. Priya's closest friends noticed her hesitant smiles and how she avoided speaking about her private life. She seemed to shrink in Rajiv's presence, her eyes betraying something deeper than shyness. Those who knew her before the marriage described her as lively and outspoken, but now she appeared quieter, guarded, as though carefully rehearsing every step in a performance she didn't fully believe in. Rajiv, meanwhile, thrived on appearances. He loved to be admired, whether at a boardroom meeting or a gala dinner. He treated Priya like an accessory to his empire, a symbol that demonstrated his power and taste. Behind closed doors, however, tension was brewing. He had little patience for defiance, and Priya, still young and independent in spirit, often resisted his attempts to control her movements. What the public saw as a whirlwind romance was, in reality, a fragile arrangement held together by wealth, appearances, and unspoken fear. Then came Rajiv's most extravagant gesture, the purchase of a luxury yacht he named the Nirvana. Stationed in Goa, it was described as his gift of eternal love, a private palace on water where the couple could escape from the world. The yacht sparkled with opulence, crystal chandeliers, marble floors, and private cabins that rivaled five-star hotels. To outsiders, it was the ultimate proof of devotion. For Rajiv, it was a monument to his control, a floating fortress where he alone dictated the rules. Priya boarded the vessel with uncertainty, unaware that the Nirvana would one day become the stage for the darkest chapter of her life. The yacht quickly became the centerpiece of Rajiv Malhotra's new life with Priya, anchored in the sparkling waters of Goa. The Nirvana was unlike anything most people had ever seen. It stretched across multiple decks, with polished teak floors, a helipad, and interiors filled with imported art. To Rajiv, the yacht was more than a possession. It was a stage where he could host the elite, seal business deals, and display his young wife as a symbol of his prosperity. Lavish parties soon became routine, with politicians, Bollywood stars, and high-profile businessmen gathering on board to drink champagne and marvel at Rajiv's wealth. Priya, always dressed in designer gowns, stood by his side, her smile fixed for cameras, her presence adding to the spectacle. But beneath the glitz, Priya grew increasingly withdrawn. Away from the flashing lights and endless toasts, She would vanish into her private cabin, scrolling aimlessly through her phone or staring at the waves with an expression that betrayed loneliness. Those who paid attention noticed her discomfort, the way her laughter sounded rehearsed, and how she avoided Rajiv's gaze when the cameras weren't around. While Rajiv thrived on attention and admiration, Priya seemed like a woman trapped in a role she hadn't chosen. Rumors soon began to swirl. Some claimed Priya had remained in contact with an old boyfriend from Mumbai, a man she had been close to before her sudden marriage. Others whispered that she had been seen slipping away for secret meetings whenever she returned to the city. The gossip made its way back to Rajiv, and for a man whose empire rested on control and reputation, the thought of betrayal was intolerable. He had built his life on carefully managing every detail, and the idea that his young wife might be disloyal threatened not only his pride, but his public image. The tension between them began to surface during gatherings on the yacht. Guests recalled moments when the atmosphere turned heavy, with Priya's smile faltering and Rajiv's jaw tightening as he watched her from across the deck. On one particular evening, he hosted a smaller gathering, inviting only a few close friends and associates. The night began with laughter and music, but witnesses noticed Rajiv drinking more than usual. He paced the deck, his voice sharp whenever he addressed Priya, while she sat quietly, her eyes lowered. At one point, the two disappeared below deck for a long stretch of time. When they re-emerged, Priya's eyes were red, and her expression was unreadable. Rajiv, on the other hand, appeared cold, his movements rigid, his smile forced. The guests soon left, each unsettled by the strange tension they had witnessed. The yacht, usually alive with noise and music, fell eerily silent that night. Only the sound of waves brushing against its sides remained. What had transpired between Rajiv and Priya below deck was unknown to the others, but the unease hung heavy in the air. As the Nirvana sat anchored under the moonlight, it became clear that the couple's marriage, once paraded as a fairy tale, was reaching a dangerous turning point. The morning after the tense evening on the yacht, chaos erupted. Priya was gone. Rajiv Malhotra told the crew that his wife must have gone for a late-night walk on the deck and somehow slipped overboard. His words were calm, but the panic that followed was anything but. The crew searched every corner of the Nirvana, from the lavish cabins to the engine room, before lowering lifeboats to scour the waters. There was no trace of Priya. Within hours, Rajiv contacted the Coast Guard, claiming he had woken up to find his wife missing. Helicopters circled the coastline, rescue boats fanned across the Arabian Sea, and divers plunged beneath the waves, but the young bride had vanished without a sound. News of Priya's disappearance spread rapidly, making headlines across the country. The image of Rajiv, distraught and weeping in front of cameras, dominated television screens. He begged authorities to find his wife, describing her as the love of his life. Many viewers sympathized with the grieving husband, but others were skeptical. Questions began to surface about the inconsistencies in his account. Why had he waited until morning to raise the alarm? If Priya had fallen during the night, why hadn't anyone heard a splash or cries for help? The story, though tragic, didn't align with the details. Journalists wasted no time digging into Priya's life. Reports emerged about her unhappiness in the marriage and the whispers of a secret relationship with a man from Mumbai. Tabloids speculated about whether she might have run away, jumped deliberately, or been forced into an argument that ended badly. Rajiv's reputation, once untouchable, suddenly became vulnerable to scrutiny. For the first time, the polished image he had built was beginning to crack. 5 days later, the story took a darker turn. Priya's body was discovered washed ashore nearly 20 miles from where the yacht had been anchored. The discovery shocked the nation, and the autopsy that followed only deepened the mystery. The official cause of death was drowning, but the medical examiner noted disturbing details. Bruises on her arms and shoulders, suggesting she had been restrained or dragged before she entered the water. These findings contradicted Rajiv's explanation of an accidental fall. Police immediately turned their attention to Rajiv. He maintained his innocence, repeating that Priya must have leaned over the railing and slipped. His lawyers worked to frame the bruises as the result of her hitting the yacht's metal sides on the way down. But investigators were not convinced. Crew members revealed that Rajiv and Priya had been arguing frequently in the weeks leading up to her death. Some even admitted overhearing shouting on the night she disappeared, though none claimed to have witnessed the actual event. The shift in public perception was swift. Where once Rajiv had been seen as a broken man, now he was being whispered about as a suspect. His sorrowful expressions on television were contrasted with headlines questioning whether they masked something more sinister. Priya's funeral was held quietly by her grieving family, who avoided the media but demanded answers. Behind the glamour of wealth and power, the truth about what had happened on the Nirvana was beginning to emerge. And the suspicions pointed in one chilling direction, or the man who had vowed to protect her. The investigation into Priya's death quickly grew into a national obsession. Detectives began piecing together the timeline of her final hours, and the spotlight fell firmly on Rajiv Malhotra. He continued to insist that his wife's death was an accident, but evidence emerging from the inquiry suggested otherwise. Financial documents revealed that just weeks before the tragedy, Rajiv had quietly taken out a massive life insurance policy on Priya, naming himself as the sole beneficiary. The payout promised to be worth millions, a detail that instantly shifted the narrative from grieving husband to calculating suspect. As investigators dug deeper, disturbing accounts from former employees surfaced. House staff from Rajiv's Delhi estate described his volatile temper, his tendency to lash out when things did not go his way, and his obsession with keeping control of every aspect of his environment. Several admitted that Priya had confided in them about feeling trapped, watched, and even threatened. She had allegedly spoken of wanting to leave the marriage, but Rajiv's influence and power made her afraid of the consequences. These testimonies painted a picture far removed from the fairy tale romance that had been sold to the public. The most damning evidence came from the yacht itself. Though Rajiv initially claimed that the onboard CCTV system had been out of order on the night of Priya's disappearance, forensic experts recovered fragments of deleted footage. The restored video, though grainy and incomplete, revealed Rajiv and Priya standing on the deck in what appeared to be a heated argument. At one point, Rajiv could be seen grabbing her arm as she struggled to pull away. The clip ended abruptly, as though intentionally cut, leaving investigators to speculate about what happened in the moments that followed. While the footage did not show her fall, it strongly suggested that Priya's death was no simple accident. The mounting evidence created a storm in the media. News anchors dissected every development. Legal experts debated Rajiv's guilt, and the public divided into camps. Some clung to the belief that Priya had been unhappy enough to take her own life, while others were convinced Rajiv had orchestrated her death to protect his pride and fortune. The image of the successful businessman began to unravel. Investors pulled out of his projects, his company's stock plummeted, and political allies distanced themselves from him. The empire he had spent decades building was suddenly on shaky ground. Rajiv's legal team launched an aggressive defense, portraying him as a victim of circumstance and media bias. They claimed the bruises on Priya's body could have been caused by the ocean currents or contact with debris. They questioned the reliability of the CCTV footage, arguing that its poor quality left room for misinterpretation. But for investigators, the combination of financial motives, eyewitness accounts of marital discord, and the recovered video painted a chilling picture. As the case progressed to court, the spectacle only intensified. Crowds gathered outside the hearings, chanting for justice. Priya's grieving family sat quietly in the gallery, their faces marked by loss, but also determination. For them, the trial was not just about uncovering the truth, but about reclaiming their daughter, his dignity from a story that had been twisted by wealth, influence, and deceit. Each revelation pushed the case closer to a conclusion that seemed inevitable. Even as Rajiv fought desperately to cling to his innocence, the trial of Rajiv Malhotra became one of the most widely followed court cases in India, a spectacle that combined wealth, tragedy, and betrayal. Every day, the courtroom filled with journalists, lawyers, and curious onlookers, hoping to witness the downfall of a man who had once seemed untouchable. Rajiv entered the hearings in tailored suits, his expression carefully composed. But the weight of evidence was heavy against him. Prosecutors laid out their case with precision. The suspicious life insurance policy, the testimonies of former staff about his controlling behavior, and the recovered CCTV footage showing him grabbing Priya on the yacht. The narrative they presented was clear. Rajiv had not only wanted control over his young wife, but also stood to profit immensely from her death. Priya's family sat silently during the proceedings, their grief unspoken but unmistakable. They had chosen not to engage with the media, but their presence in the courtroom became a quiet symbol of resilience. Photographs of Priya, once radiant, smiling, full of youth, were displayed during the trial, a stark reminder of what had been lost. In contrast, Rajiv's defense tried to cast doubt at every turn. They argued that the bruises on her arms were consistent with injuries caused by the ocean, not a struggle. They claimed the CCTV footage was inconclusive and incomplete, and they suggested Priya had been deeply unhappy, hinting that she may have jumped intentionally. But the defense's arguments could not erase the mounting inconsistencies in Rajiv's story. The trial stretched on for months, with every detail scrutinized and dissected by the press. Public opinion hardened against Rajiv as more evidence emerged. His empire collapsed further with each passing week. Investors pulled out of his company's major projects were halted, and employees lost their jobs as financial irregularities came to light. The man who had once stood at the peak of power and wealth was now portrayed as a manipulator who valued control and reputation over human life. When the verdict was finally delivered, the courtroom was silent. Rajiv was found guilty of murdering his wife. The judge described his actions as driven by pride, greed, and an unwillingness to accept humiliation. The sentence was life imprisonment, punishment that sent shockwaves through the business and political circles that had once embraced him. For Priya's family, the judgment brought some measure of closure, though nothing could erase the pain of her loss. For the public, it was a reminder that even the most powerful could not escape justice forever. The story did not end with the trial. Rajiv's empire crumbled completely in the aftermath, exposing years of hidden debts and questionable deals. Thousands of employees were left struggling, their livelihoods destroyed by the fall of the man they had once served. The yacht, the Nirvana, was seized by the government and later sold at auction. But its name carried a stain that no amount of polish could erase. To many, it would always be remembered not as a symbol of love or luxury, but as the scene of a young woman's final moments. Priya's story lived on, told in documentaries, books, and endless discussions about power and control in relationships. She became a symbol of how appearances can deceive, how glamour can mask fear, and how wealth can hide the darkest truths until it is too late. Her fate was a cautionary tale that reverberated across society, a chilling reminder that beneath the glitter of privilege, tragedy can lurk unseen. And so, the legacy of Rajiv Malhotra was not his empire or his wealth, but the crime that exposed him, leaving behind a name forever associated with betrayal and the silence of the sea.